Welcome to Film Strip Sessions, where we discuss a topic about movies, television, or entertainment at large. I'm Jay, and alongside with me today, two guests who should be familiar voices to Film Strip and are part of your regular listening habits. First off, Phil from Phil at the Movies, as well as DC Unlimited. Phil.
Thanks for having me back, Jay. Looking forward to this discussion. It's been a long time in the works, so definitely looking forward to diving into the world of political thrillers tonight.
Indeed. And joining us for that, a voice from all the cool shit you should be listening to besides Film Strip, Carmelita Valdez-McKoy.
Hi, friends. I'm so happy to be back on Film Strip talking movies with the two of you.
Absolutely. And like Phil talked about, we are going to be talking about political thrillers, as you see in the title tonight, and want to get into all of that stuff. But first off, we're gonna do lists and all that kind of thing. But I just want to start with this without listing anything specific. What is it that each of you finds intriguing or captivating about the genre or subgenre of political thriller?
Carmela, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think political thrillers it draws on this fear we have, these anxieties around what we expect from governments and the institutions that we rely on, right? This is supposed to be the framework that keeps our society intact, that keeps everything functioning. We expect our government and related institutions to give us stability, protection, and political thrillers really drill in, the really good ones, the effective ones, drill into our anxieties about, well, what if that's threatened? What if they don't do that? What if they can't do that? What if there's someone threatening our way of life, right? Because it's the government's the infrastructure that we're supposed to be able to look to keep our society running. And so I think that's why films will continue to draw from this well. And also, it's just really interesting. And I think too, another thing, the unknown is part of this. Like the average person has a very basic understanding of how these institutions work. There's a
Right.
lot there's a lot behind the scenes that the average person doesn't know. And so that can be a source of anxiety and paranoia and concern. And there's all of these intricacies that you're like, I don't really know how that works. And so how could that be exploited? How could that be used against me? How could
Right.
someone infiltrate that? It's endless, the possibilities of what you can do with a political thriller.
That's well said. Well said. Phil, what about you?
Well, I'll certainly co-sign everything that you said there because I think you nailed it perfectly. The only thing I would just add is politics is essentially how we govern ourselves, and I think we often have this high-minded, optimistic belief that it just everything will work out, sort of the Camelot version, if you will, or vision. And so often it's the case, as we see in real life, that it's just not reality. And a lot of times there's just incompetence. I mean, there's no other way to say it. But then there's also the dark side, the nefarious aspects, and it's the type of genre where the best of them will shine a bright light on what is going on, either for better or for worse. And it's usually the ones that are more thought-provoking that kind of get the audience to look and say, okay, this is inadequate or this is something we want to avoid. So in a lot of ways, they can be certainly entertaining and take you on a thrilling ride, but I think the best of them sort of make us step back and take a look at ourselves, but also our leaders, our institutions, and kind of reevaluate in a way like what exactly is going on here and how can we be involved? Because I mean, like it or not, everything is political today, and
Mhm.
certainly in movies, there's no shortcoming for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the best political thrillers, or maybe even just the best thrillers, ask two questions and then ask the audience to get involved in those answers. And it's so what and now what?
Mm.
So like
Yeah.
this idea, and I think you both have hit on it, is that we put a lot of trust in these institutions, these people, and what we ultimately and what we learn a lot of the times is that they're just as flawed and stupid as the rest of us, and they make the same flawed and stupid mistakes that we make, but it's on a much grander scale sometimes, or maybe it's not, and that's the funny part of it, is that it should be scarier, but it's not. And how do we get away with that? And I think we need to talk about too, because and Phil, you were going down that road, so I want to toss this back to you real quick. The political thriller is a specific sort of subgenre of the thriller genre, and inside of that we've got spy stories like James Bond that we've talked about, and there's romantic thrillers, there's all kinds of things, or as Carmelita likes to call those, the bleak and horny movies, and because there's a lot of those out there.
There are.
There are. Yeah,
Fair point. Fair point.
I mean, there are. But what is it about the political thriller? Like, what are the elements that you think, like, hey, that you got to have those things if you're going to have a political thriller?
I think first and foremost, you have to have some level of intrigue, whether that is a presidential or political candidate or somebody in the upper echelons of government. You have to have that intrigue, whether it is just pure incompetence and watching kind of the house of cards fall apart,
Mm-hmm.
or watching something much more nefarious, either a plot from within or a plot on the outside. So you've got to have that, I think, element of intrigue. And again, whether it's incompetence run amok or dark deeds kind of going on behind the scenes, I think you've got to have the level of intrigue. You've also got to ground it in a reality. And again, this applies whether you're talking about a sci-fi political thriller, comic book, or just something based on true events. You have to ground it in a reality, because otherwise you're going to lose the audience. You have to
Mm-hmm.
make it relatable, and I won't name the film yet because I want to I won't spoil my list. But even when you are setting something in, say, a dystopian future, if you are grounding it in a reality with sort of the basic understandings of what we as an audience know, we're more willing to go on that ride, even if it's to a place that maybe we've never been before. If the situation is relatable, either because of something going on in present day or is drawing from, say, historical event or precedent, that kind of gives that access point for the audience. So I would really say it's grounding it in a reality and then just having that level of intrigue. And then the rest of it is kind of, I don't want to say window dressing, but it's almost just sort of added bonus. If you have that sort of reality
Mm-hmm.
as a foundation, but then that element of intrigue, those I think are the main ingredients that kind of get you going on this ride.
I agree 100%. Carmelita,
Yeah.
where do you come down with that?
No, I agree. I think that's essential. I think too, there has to be, like, the stakes in these things have to be high.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
And even if the movie kind of centering on, the plight of one person or one faction or one group, there has to be these larger stakes.
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
I think too, power is necessary in this. There has to be some element of that. There's this element of power. Who has the power, and how do they use the power?
mm,
Yeah, the power dynamic, I think, is the fun part of these, and to watch it get shifted and manipulated, and the pieces that work in them to do that. That's what makes them fun to watch. Like, I was having this convo with some friends offline about just like go-to comfort movies. Just I can throw this on and I can just get lost in it. And it's usually something the big cast. And my kind of go-to, I have a few, but one of them is always for me is Ocean's 11. And I don't
Mm.
mean the original. I mean the one that we all know, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, that ensemble cast, because I can just get lost in that world of
mm,
these thieves robbing a casino so he can get back with Julia Roberts. I mean, that's a ridiculous idea, but it is a movie about power dynamics,
mm.
a lot too. And back in the younger days in undergrad, because I realized I was going to watch a lot of movies anyway, and so how can I weave those into my term papers? I would take classes on like power dynamics and communication and stuff, and I would always bring in these types of thoughts and stories. And I remember having a conversation with a professor about it. She said, every semester there seems to be somebody else that figures out how to do this. She said, where does this come from? And I said, I just watch these things through that lens, and I think if you what's fun about these is they come in a couple of batches. There's ones like based on true stories, and then there's ones that are going to take something that could be true. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, we don't know. But either way, they play in the same field of giving us at least one believable person to latch into, and then that same arc that you get in any good drama. The problem happens, everything goes to hell, and then do we solve it or do we not? And the race against time, the ticking clock, all those different dramatic elements make these things work. And we've talked about it a little bit, but I think you both have hit on something that I wanted to bring up. Is there's got to be a little bit of a hint of realism in these things for them to work. Because like I love the Mission Impossible movies and I like the James Bond movies, but there comes a line when it's like, this is clearly like operating in a world that could only exist in the video game world that those things live in, right? That like, it can't be just that. So, and that separates them, from something like some of the movies that I'm sure we'll talk about tonight. But I think that element of realism is so important because it's there's nothing like watching a movie and then walking out of the theater and going like, wow, I feel like I've like known that or seen that. I'll give you a good example. My wife and I went and saw Gone Girl because we heard everybody just raving about it, and we didn't know the book, we didn't know any of it, and we walked into the theater and we just sat there and let that crash over you. And if you know the twist in the movie, we walked out of that looking at each other like, so that was weird, right? We're good, right? So like it just made you think. I said, well, okay, I haven't had that happen in the theater in a while. But I liked it because it felt like, as crazy as that was, we both like a lot of true crime stuff. I could see it.
Yeah, no, I think realism is important to draw from something that is in current events, as we've seen in the news, or something that people speculate about. If it's really well executed, a filmmaker can take some liberties and go
Yeah. Yeah.
in the direction, where there's sci-fi elements that kind of go above and beyond, or dystopian elements that go above and beyond what's real. But there always has to be that grounding in some aspect that we recognize.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Carmelita. We were talking about that on the Minority Report review recently, and how that movie gets a lot of credit for like predicting the future, and it didn't do that as much as Spielberg brought in people for a think tank who were on the cutting edge of inventing things, and had them, okay, how would that look in a our world now? And the fact that it came to pass 20 years later, he says it's not prophetic, y'all. It's we did good research and they've been working on it. Like,
Right.
this is what it is. But it's because he said, but I felt like that was important that for something this fanciful, he said, because the source material, he said, it was written by a guy in 1956 thinking about 2056. He said, so we're not doing that kind of a jump. He said, so how do we give this in something where people don't get lost in the tech of it, and then they can go on the ride of the story? And I feel like that's what you're saying too. There's got to be that morsel that I can like, oh yeah, I can see that actually working. I can see there being a computer that you can move things you're around on the screen with your hands, which we all have now, right? But in 2002, we didn't. But you can believe it, and then it allows you to go for the ride.
That's a good point.
I think that matters. I mean, Phil, you and I are both Nolan heads, so thinking about like Inception and Tenet, and particularly Tenet, we had a good discussion about Tenet on your show, and thinking about all those things that, like, even as wild as that central conceit is, that's still grounded in some bit of reality.
Bingo.
Yeah.
No, it's automatic buy-in for the audience. If you take the time to build out the world, I mean, this is why world building is so important in any story, but particularly in a thriller. If the audience can buy into it, pretty much anything else that happens, they're going to be along for the ride regardless. But it's that effort at establishing this is the world, this is the parameters, and then the rest, all right, go have fun in the sandbox.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, y'all, I think we've done enough preamble. It's time to get into our list of political thrillers. So I asked each of you to compile a list of top 5 political thrillers. And I did say that we could have some honorable mentions in there. I'm going to ask you to hold those until the very end. We have not shared lists ahead of time, so I have no idea what these two people are about to say, and they don't know what I'm going to say either. But we're going to go around the horn, and we're going to go 5-1 on these. And you look, rankings are subjective. We're going to say that out there. This is just things that we all like. But the rule is, if Carmelita mentions the movie, if Phil and I have it on our list somewhere, we're not going to talk about it at that moment. We're going to wait till we all get it out, and then we will discuss it. And if by chance, one of those gets thrown out that nobody else has, we'll stop then and talk about it. I call that the Halloweenies rule. If y'all listen to their list shows, that's how they do it. And it's kind of how I like to do it too. I think it's a good way of doing things. So shout out to those guys. So Carmelita, start us off with your number 5 political thriller.
Oh, I agonized over this. And I realized like 2 seconds before we jumped in to start that my 4 and 5, there's a lot of similarities, even though they seem really different, but I'm going with it. I'm not tinkering anymore. So number 5, I'm going with Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion from 1970. Anybody? No?
Well, is that on your list?
No, it is not.
It's not on my list.
It's a good choice though. I like that.
Please school us, because I am curious now. Yeah.
This is cool, and it's an Italian film.
Okay.
In the Italian language, directed by Elio Petri, screenplay by Elio Petri and Ugo Piero, stars a bunch of Italian actors you may or may not know. Gian Maria Volente, Florinda Bolkan, Gianni Santuccio. So this is cool. It's a man commits a murder at the beginning of the film, and then you see him kind of planting, like messing with evidence, like he's purposely leaving footprints and other things, and he's moving things around, like he's staging the crime. But instead of taking evidence away, it's like he's planting evidence of his own guilt. And I can tell you this is not a spoiler because this is the whole premise of the film within the first 10 minutes. This guy was a high-ranking homicide detective who on that very day is going to start his new promoted position in the political section.
Ooh.
He's going to be working in the political division, but the whole premise of this film is that this high-ranking official, he believes in the rule of law. He believes in consolidating power, keeping power, crushing dissent. He sees your everyday street crime as the same as political dissent.
Ooh.
And he is like daring all these other law enforcement and political officials to catch him. He wants someone to enforce the law. It's like he wants to get caught, but maybe doesn't want to get caught. You kind of go back and forth, and you kind of watch him throughout the film. He might as well just put a big sandwich board on that says, "I'm the killer. Do something about it." And
I am
wow.
It's really cool, and it's kind of artsy, because it's Italy in the 70s. But I think what I love about this is that there's a connection that's being made here between all the talk about this crime and this other crime are the same. Why are some people above suspicion and not others? And you kind of it's exploring the lengths people will go to either willfully ignore the evidence that points to someone in power, or kind of everyday citizens who witness something or suspect something, but because of the power dynamics are too afraid to be a whistleblower or give evidence. It's cool.
I'm really intrigued by this. Now I know the actor Jean Maria Volante from the $2 movies he was in.
Yeah,
I knew that name. but I'm intrigued by this because it sounds like just my kind of bag, like for how people just memory hold themselves out of the obvious choice for stuff. So I'm making a note to put this through the lens soon. This is a
It's
good one.
it's cool, and you know, when someone mentions police, we a lot of times we lump that in with like a crime thriller,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and you know, those closed circles.
Hmm.
What I like about this one is that it draws the direct line. Law enforcement is an extension of the government's power.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah,
It's not separate.
I
And
love
so
this.
this film takes that on directly.
I'm thrilled about this. Phil, what do you think?
I co-sign that. I love that you started right out the gate with something that neither of us had on our list. So that I'm really excited about. But just with what you have described here, I'm with Jay. This sounds like a movie that I probably should go watch right now or something like that. This just sounds like an absolutely wild and entertaining ride.
Yeah, it's out. I mean, currently in the US, it's on Amazon Prime
Oh, even
Oh,
better. Even
yeah,
better. All right.
perfect. I was
and
about
for
to ask that
available
question.
to rent
So
in other places. So yeah, it's
Okay.
out there,
perfect.
it's available. It's really beautifully done. It's like a beautiful film. And
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those that the tension builds slowly. You know,
Okay.
as the story gets more and more involved, it
Uh,
starts to get more intense.
like a good slow burn. That sounds,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
very good. Well, I love that. Thank you, Carmelita. Investigation of a citizen above suspicion.
like that. Like
All
that.
right, Phil, what's your number five?
All right, number five for me is V for Vendetta.
All right. It's not on my list.
Okay.
Is it on yours, Carmelita?
It is not.
Okay. All right.
Ah, I
All right.
like
Yeah,
this.
all
So
right.
Phil,
Perfect.
go
We're
ahead.
start. We're
I
start.
have seen this. So
No. So this was the. I went back and forth on this one whether it would be an honorable mention or not, but then I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it in there because this film I find myself revisiting at least once a year, just because of one, I love the performances in it. You have
mm,
Natalie Portman, you've got Hugo Weaving. It's just a well acted film. To say nothing of the fact that if you have read the graphic novel on which it's based from the legendary Alan Moore, it's a wonderful translation to the screen, but yet it maintains its own identity. So the way the film looks, its style, I'm a big fan of that. But certainly this film has garnered a lot of discussion, a lot of opinions, because on the face of it, and I'll just read out a quick synopsis just for anyone who may not have seen the film. In a future British dystopian society, a shadowy freedom fighter known only by the alias of V plots to overthrow the tyrannical government with the help of a young woman. And again, this movie, a lot of people can read into it sort of where their political affiliations or beliefs tend to lie. There's a there's a wonderful debate. Is this a strictly pro freedom film? Is this a film that's essentially advocating for anarchy? I mean, it's an anti-government film, but it's
mm,
a question of to how far or how extreme do you go? Because certainly once you are talking about overthrowing any form of government, there is an element of anarchy in there, even if the reasons are for a noble end, to end an oppressive regime. And I like that even though the film sort of makes its extremes with the character of V and his Guy Fawkes mask, I love that it still walks that fine line where on the one hand, if you want to read into it, it's an allegory for freedom and fighting back against oppression, but then at the same time, it's almost a cautionary tale. And I kind of like where Natalie Portman's character comes in. She's almost our eyes in a way, where she's
mm.
watching this all unfold and kind of making the decision. Again, I'm not going to spoil the ending for anybody if you haven't seen it, but she then has to kind of make that decision. Okay, do I follow this revolution, if you will, to its logical end? And I kind of like that the film sort of flirts with either, on the one hand, putting you sort of on the path of that V lays out, but at the same time allowing you to sort of reflect and be like, okay, what choice would I make in this situation? Is this guy a hero? Is he just an anarchist? It's a wonderful threading of that needle.
I haven't seen this one in a couple of years, but I remember when it came out, not knowing the source material or anything,
Mhm.
going and seeing it and just being deeply affected by
Yeah.
it. In a lot of ways, and one of those that I ended up talking other people into going to see because I was like, we have to talk about this.
Hmm.
And it's the kind of movie that if you just want to watch it for its visuals and the way that it comes off, you can get a ton from that. It's like a good
Bingo.
film school. But if you want to get into the granular parts of all of it and who's right and who's justified and what actions and things, it's an incredible mind twister of a film. And I'm so glad you mentioned it because it's not on my list. But wow, what a strong entry.
And another thing I would just add about it, even though it's sort of, it's set, in a far off, not necessarily a far off future, going back to what I mentioned earlier, but it grounds itself in a reality where even though this was made in like 2005, 2006,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel dated. You can watch it today, and the themes and the ideas are just as relevant, even if again, technology or whatnot has changed in some ways, or for better or for worse. The ideas in the story are sort of universal, and again, that to me gets back to the idea of you establish that reality and kind of ground it in sort of universal themes. It doesn't matter when you pick up the film. If it's strong enough, it's going to be relevant and topical at any point in time.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. So it came out what,
I think
2000?
it was 2006, so almost 20 years
Mm-hmm.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had just finished my undergraduate degree in politics.
Oh, okay.
Nice. I knew there was a
So,
reason we had you on the show.
and so yeah, I remember when this came out, and it was I think the thing that I can appreciate about it is that being this big glossy blockbuster type film,
Yeah.
but then because of the questions that it raises and kind of the themes that it's exploring, it got people thinking about things and talking about things that they might not otherwise.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when this came out, like I was a lot more kind of publicly political at that time.
Hmm.
And so I remember getting into some very interesting conversations with people after they would see this movie, and then
Yeah.
and then they would bring something up, and then we would get into a
Yeah.
discussion. So yeah, it's a really interesting film. I think, when was the last time I watched it? That was probably a few years ago. Because I think I saw it when it first came out, and then I didn't see it again. Yeah, until just a few years ago. But it takes me back when I think about it. It takes me back to a very
Yeah.
specific time and place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the time that it came out, it was it was touching on something. Again, this is in a lot of ways kind of very fantastical,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, the war on terror,
Yep. Yep.
all of
Yeah.
those things, people were asking questions
Hmm.
about, like, wait a
Lots
second.
of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's
And
going
so,
on here? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so a film like V for Vendetta gave people something to mull over and be entertained at the same time, which is oftentimes one of the best vehicles for getting people
Yeah.
interested in something, if you can
Bingo.
make it entertaining. So,
And I'll add in too that one of the things that always appealed to me on the level was I knew of Philip K. Dick coming up and things, but I didn't really like get into him until college and adulthood and
Hmm.
things like that, right? So I had read a lot of his stuff, and there's a lot of underpinnings about distrust of the government for
Yeah.
Philip K. Dick. and it
Just a little
bleeds.
bit.
Just that's putting it mildly. That's like saying Motley Crue's into fast, loud guitars. So, but but inside of that, I feel like V for Vendetta plays with some of those things, but
Yeah.
without getting lost in the completely cynical trope that Dick stuff gets interpreted into a lot of ways. And I like that about it because it is dark and
Mm.
kind of Orwellian and all that, but inside of it, there's also this it's done by the assistant director of the Matrix. You got the Wachowskis doing the adaptation, so it's got that sheen on it, but without getting too far into that realm. It's a good balance of things. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I think it lasts and holds up.
Exactly. Those are the best kind of films.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good one. So we've had Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion and V for Vendetta. Here comes my curveball out of the gate. I'm going to talk about a little film directed by one Stanley Kubrick, but from 1957 called Paths of Glory. Is it on either of your lists?
Not
No.
on my list, but I
Nope.
have seen it.
All right.
Same.
Okay, good deal. Well, I thought it probably wouldn't wind up on a list, but you may have seen it. I discovered this years ago when Kurt and I were going through the films of Stanley Kubrick. It was one that I had not seen. And since then, it's one I've seen several times because it's a different kind of political thriller because it lives in a bit of historical fiction. Like we're going to take I feel like World War II has been glamorized on cinema way more than World War One, and largely because it was a European conflict, much more than it was an American conflict. We got in at the very end of World War One, and what we know about it and our point of view from it as Americans is different. And this film, it's like all Kubrick stuff's based on a book about something else, but it's about you see a failed raid, in trench warfare, and then you see this colonel played by Kirk Douglas. He's amazing in this. If you only know Kirk Douglas as the old, dad of Michael Douglas, you're missing out, people. Or as any of the old characters he's played, he's such an incredible actor. But he is a colonel who is an attorney in his private life. And so he takes on the unenviable task of defending three men who've been brought up for court martial and essentially execution because somebody's got to be a scapegoat because the raid didn't work, because a major general is trying to get promoted. And it's all about, I have to win this. This can't be my fault. I have to move up the chain and be promoted. And then you have this Colonel Dax who was actually there and lived it, but he has to be this objective advocate for these three men who've just been randomly selected from each of the little corps there to try to defend them against impossible odds. And what it really exposes in a lot of ways is how once the system gets its sights set on you and you're just a pawn, like this corporal and this privates are, you're just cannon fodder, and getting out of the way of that machine is impossible. But the effort of what the Colonel Dax character, Kirk Douglas's character, does is what makes it such a noble and interesting discussion. And I don't know, it's a different one, but I just love this movie and wanted to have a chance to talk about it again at some point. So Paths of Glory is my number 5.
No, it's a beautiful film. It was one of my Kubrick blind spots until just a few years ago.
Mm.
And yeah, beautifully done, as his films always are.
Mm.
And no, I like that you put this here because this is always the question, right? Because because politics touches so many aspects of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
What defines a political thriller, right? Like, what is political? And so, like, my first thought when you said it was like, oh, I think of that as a war film. But as you're talking about it, it's like, no, it absolutely fits.
But it's about the politics of
it can be
generals and war and all of that.
Yes.
And it's also, I had a feeling you were going to come out with something that was non-American, Carmelita, and I couldn't be outdone. And I was like, no, we have to have something set in a foreign area. If it's an American film, it's got to be about something else, because those to me are super intriguing things, because I don't live in that world. I don't know that system, even though it's similar to ours. It's a lot older. It's grounded in a lot of different rules. And so and again, I'm not in the military and don't ever plan on being. And so the idea of court martials work very differently than me and you going to court,
Can I give you a recommendation?
Oh, please.
Something similar, touching on some similar themes.
Mhm.
King and Country.
Ooh.
It's
Uh,
I need to pull it up so I have
this is
the
the 1964 movie. Is that the one you're talking about?
hold on a second. I want to make sure that people can find it. Yes.
Okay.
King and Country, 1964, Joseph Lucy.
Mhm.
Stars Dirk Bogarde, but it's a lot of these same kind of themes, and in this case, it's these men are going to be executed.
Yeah, because they keep getting overruled. I've seen this movie actually. I know I've
Yeah.
seen it.
Oh,
So
it's
yeah,
so good.
yeah, very good. Phil, what about you and Paths of Glory?
Anytime I can revisit a Stanley Kubrick film, I have to. So thank you for reminding me to rewatch this film because it has been it's been a hot minute. I, this is I was thinking the same thing as Carmelita. I would not have associated this off the top as a political thriller, but you nailed it to a T. You absolutely did because again, that's sort of the beauty of Kubrick, especially. He
Mm.
can work with so many different genres and subgenres and make them all blend perfectly. Whereas a lot of directors, you sort of give them too many pots on the stove, so to speak. It becomes just an ungodly mess that no one wants to eat. But that's again, that's the whole genius of Kubrick. No, I mean this is a beautiful film, and it's funny. You certainly don't hear it talked about enough, I think, with regards to his filmography. I mean, you always hear the fan favorites, if you will. I mean, 2001 or The Shining or Eyes Wide Shut, just to name a couple. But no, this deserves more recognition, and again, maybe just because it's much yeah, not dated in the sense, but just it's not as prevalent as some of his other films. But no, I would recommend anybody checking out this, particularly if you haven't seen it, because it's worth it because it's a young Kubrick. You can
Hmm.
see all of the design choices, shall we say, that touch on in a lot of his later films.
Well, I would say too, as a final coda on it, if you like anything about courtroom dramas at all, the template for everything that you like is
Yeah,
in this movie. Like
yeah.
they're just copying this over and over again. It kind of blew me away when I first saw it of how many legal thrillers from the 80s and 90s, because that's another kind of pet subgenre of mine is those like presumed innocent and all the John Grisham movies and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, they're just doing this. They're just doing this again and again and again, and it's just a touchstone for all of those things. So I'm glad y'all have been on that ride as well. Well, Carlene, we're up to your number 4. I can't
All
wait to
right.
hear this.
I'm sure someone's got this on their list. So I'm prepared to table it. Blowout, 1981, directed by Brian De Palma.
Not on my list. Phil's on yours.
It's an honorable mention.
Okay, all right. Well, you know what? Let's
Nice.
go ahead and talk about it then. So
Yeah.
I'll still one of your honorable mentions, but go ahead, Carmelita. This one's not on my
Cool.
list.
Yeah, so Blowout, 1981, directed by Brian De Palma, written by Brian De Palma, starring John Travolta, Nancy Allen, John Lithgow, Dennis Franz. So this one is cool, and I'll just say this right now. When I was coming up with this list, where I ranked things, I was kind of thinking about kind of the strength of the political element
Mm.
and the thrills. This one is high
Hmm.
on thrills, and there is a political element. I think for a lot of folks, what really stands out in this one is the sound design, is this aspect of Travolta's character,
Mhm.
a guy who works as a Foley artist doing sound for film, captures, witnesses this accident, and ends up with evidence on tape
Mm.
and is then being hunted because the evidence implicates a governor who intends to run for president. And I think with a film like this, people really get into the sound, and then of course it's De Palma, so it's just dripping with style
Hmm.
Yeah.
and the thrills, right? The tension and this race to outrun these spooks who are coming after him. But I think the political element of this one is kind of cool, even though it may be not the aspect people think of first with this film,
Mhm.
is that like let's say you're minding your own business and you witness someone powerful doing something illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And then that realization of, but who would believe me?
Yeah.
And I'm just one
Yeah.
person. And if they come after me, what recourse do I have? And so I think it really taps into that paranoia. And I like too this idea of capturing evidence. Now, in 1981, most of us did not walk around with those big, heavy video cameras, right? Or sound recording equipment.
Unless you're in one of the Paranormal Activity movies.
Right.
Yeah.
So in 81, the fact that this guy does sound for film is the reason why he's out recording sounds in
Mm-hmm.
public. And most people would not have done that. So it's kind of this, I guess at the time would have been kind of fantastical, right? Nowadays, we all have recording devices on us 100% of the time. And
They're
everywhere you
listening to
go.
us at all times.
So in some regards, this is actually even more relevant to each and every one of us today
Mm-hmm.
than it was then, when it would have been odd for someone. It would have been unusual for someone to be able to capture something out in public like that and have evidence. Nowadays, that's par for the course everywhere you go. But I think this film really gets that, like, that kind of the hopelessness of like, I need to get out of the jam that I'm in, and I don't know how to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
and these people are powerful and they have resources and I have none of that. and
Right.
where do you go? What do you do? And the cast is great. I think Travolta, this is one of his greatest performances. Nancy Allen is wonderful, as she always is on screen. It's just beautiful.
Bill, this was in your honorable mention, so
Yeah.
please.
No, I flirted with this one, but Carmelita said it so eloquently. I love the idea of an average person being put in an impossible situation, because that's a great window for us as an audience. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember the first time watching this, it must have been probably 10 or 15 years ago. So it was sort of like, smartphones were a thing, but it obviously isn't like what it is now. And I just remember thinking it was such a cool premise that, again, the guy, records sound for movies for a living. That was a great in for this situation. And then, again, minding his own business, everything is happy go lucky. And then, of course, he's thrown right into the middle of a high stakes event. I just remember being instantly captivated by that. And again, the lengths you would go. Okay, who's going to believe me? How can I let people know this? Again, you're right there, and that's what I sort of love about this style of film, where it's not some staffer or somebody on the candidate's detail. It's an average Joe, and that again is a great way to bring the audience in, because then it makes us say, well, what would we do if we were in Travolta's position? And I'd even go a step further. I think this might even be his best performance. I just love what he was able to accomplish, particularly, this is after Grease, this is after, Saturday Night Fever, and this is so different. This is playing against type for Travolta. So I always love that this was sort of like a big breakaway. And of course, you've got Brian De Palma, who's just, I mean, could say no more, just an absolute master.
I mean, a lot of people like to throw at De Palma that he's just like the low rent Hitchcock.
No, not true.
And
That's
I think
bullshit.
yeah, it's totally reductive. What he is he learned and liked the style of something, and then he gave it his own spin. And that's what I appreciate about him, is because this is very much a Hitchcockian story. And but it's got that, and the only way I know how to say it, it's got that De Palma lens on it, which can only like tell that, like, they've remade how many versions of Carrie now, and none of them have been nearly as
They
interesting as
all
the De
suck.
Palma.
No.
Yeah,
They all
they're
suck
they're all terrible
because they're missing him. That's
because
the
they're missing
point.
him.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
gave that, which let's be real, if you've read it, is a pretty drab, depressing story. Real shock coming from Stephen King, but it's a pretty drab story. He gave it this whole life, and he's able to do that with just the camera movements and the mix of music and the way he works with his editors and all the things. No, I love this movie too. It didn't even cross my mind to put it on the list, and I'm glad both of you had it somewhere in there because it's been so long since I watched it, and now I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna go and pull this one up too because this is a great Travolta performance. It's in a way like you don't see him. It's also a good John Lithgow
Yeah.
performance. Who just
Yeah.
that man again could act his way through decades and has. But
Could do
this
no
is
wrong.
yeah, I think this is before people really knew who he was too. Like
Mm.
I don't think in terms of endearment really kind of broke him to the mainstream in '83, and because everybody remembers Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine in that movie, I remember John Lithgow.
Mm.
So
Yeah. No,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, because he's got it's a small role, but he's got a great role in that one. Because he had that in Footloose in the same like two swing, and like that put him on a different map. And then he's just been with us ever since. Now he's in, he's playing priests and conclaves and stuff like that. So, which is topical, but
Yeah, that's right.
but in this case, yeah, he's so good, and it is. I love the central conceit, the way you talked about it, Carmelita. It's what if just one of us regular average Jills and Joes came across something and saw something, and we just wanted to get away from it, and then people started hunting us for it. Like, what would you do? I don't know. Like that's a tough
Right.
question, and that's what makes the chase part of it fun. So yeah, no, Blowout's great addition to our list here. Phil, the ball is in your court for number 4.
So I knew I was going to have to get an Oliver Stone film on this list.
Mhm.
And this was another real tough choice because there's the obvious film that could go on here, but I didn't want to go with the obvious. Instead, I went with a film that I think has had a lot of, I don't want to say reappraisals, but definitely has grown on people from when it was released. God, I think now we're looking at close to 30 years ago, and that is Nixon. This is not a traditional political thriller. Some might call it a biopic in a way, or an Oliver Stone, fever dream biopic. I really look at this as a political thriller because the way the story is told, one, it's classic Oliver Stone with intercutting back and forth, and we start here, we end up on his resignation day, then we go back to Nixon, growing up in California. This is a story about power. This is a story about one man's obsession to obtain power and the fear he has of losing it. And of course, there's classic Oliver Stone, introducing conspiracy theories and his, fever dream ideas into the narrative that just sort of, it's like JFK on steroids in a lot of ways, in this film. But at the core, it's about power. It's about the abuse of power and what somebody would do to hold on to it. And you've got Anthony Hopkins giving one of his best performances, I would say. I just love that he's not doing a Nixon impression. He's not even doing the jowls or the, even, the prosthetic nose. Like it's Anthony Hopkins. You can see it's Anthony Hopkins, but yet he's embodying the traits, the paranoia, the unhinged nature of Richard Nixon. And whether, again, I think there's probably some debate about the historical accuracies or inaccuracies in this film, but putting that all aside, it is taking the central premise of the down, sort of the rise and fall of Richard Nixon, and Stone almost presents it as almost a Greek tragedy in a lot of ways, but yet at its core, it's this idea of this guy who was from nothing, had nothing, and yet rose to the pinnacle of power, not just in the United States, but in the world, and literally lost it because of his own delusions or his own mistakes, his own flaws and weaknesses. And it's a gripping film. You've got the wonderful operatic score by John Williams that just really enhances it from start to finish. This is definitely more of a an out of the box choice, but to me, it's a wonderful examination on the sort of the dangers of power and sort of the lure and lure that it has for people that achieve it. And Nixon is kind of put under the microscope, if you will, in this film.
I've never
Carmelita?
seen it.
Oh,
I
you're in for a
know.
treat.
Oh, you're right. It is. Yeah.
Crazy, right? I've never seen it.
Phil, you said Greek tragedy, and I want to give you a different framing device to think of it. And you could almost do that if you just wanted to study Richard Nixon anyway. Think of this as the American Macbeth.
Bingo.
Because
Yeah.
that's
perfect.
who Richard Nixon, as the character in this movie and in a lot of ways in life, was. He came from nothing.
Yeah.
He rose to complete power, and his own paranoia and ego was his downfall.
Yeah.
And
perfect.
And Anthony Hopkins gives an incredible performance. Joan Allen's great in this. Paul Sorvino as Henry Kissinger is, you don't even know it's him.
You know.
And then you realize it is, and you're like, holy cow, what a performance. I saw this in theaters when it came out because I had to see what Oliver Stone's take on this was going to be. And then I remember sitting there and it wasn't a very packed theater because the movie didn't do that great, but I was just sitting there just eating this up, as a freshman in college. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And I've only revisited a couple of times. It's a hard watch. No doubt.
Yeah. No, it's not an easy watch, but particularly if you watch the extended cut.
It goes a little bit.
Yeah.
Stone doesn't know when to stop.
He likes
Yeah.
It's Oliver Stone unhinged. Really.
Yes, it really is.
Something,
It really is. And so it's like, okay, there's a reason editors exist. But it's still, Carmelita, if you've never seen it, it's definitely worth a watch.
I have never seen it. It's kind of funny because I do enjoy the films of Oliver Stone. Natural Born Killers is one of my favorite movies. And a lot of people hate that movie. I adore it.
A great first date from hell story to tell that involves that movie sometime off my.
Oh boy. I'm gonna bookmark that one, Jack.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later. I gotta hear that. So, I think when this came out, by that time, I think I was a little burnt out on hearing about Watergate. JFK too. I didn't see JFK until just a few years ago. Because I think by that point, I was just like, man, can we shut up about JFK and Nixon? I was just so sick of it. But these are pivotal events in the history of the United States, shifting of public awareness and public perception, and this. It was an inroad for people to start questioning, because I feel like in other countries around the world, given conflicts that had happened, given regime changes and occupations, and people in other parts of the world, there was already this questioning. I think here in the United States, this whole American dream and the greatest democracy in the world, all of that rhetoric, a lot of people were coasting on that for a very long time. And something about political thrillers, in thinking of kind of the trends over time, it's like you have the two kinds where you have the government is ultimately it's this outside agent, this outside enemy government, or this small faction that's trying to bring down your just government. And the purpose of the film is the just government needs to to prevail. And then as we get deeper through the Cold War, and then we hit, the JFK assassination and political dissent being squashed, and Watergate and Nixon, everything that entailed, then you start to get what if the government is not just? What if the government is corrupt? And we need some brave person or group to challenge that, to expose it and challenge it. And I think Nixon and kind of the events of that time period for Americans was kind of a switch, like, maybe we have to start questioning this. And so I like that you added this, even though I haven't seen the film. I think there to revisit that presidency and that time period
Mhm.
and what it meant to kind of the perception of the United States internally is an important one.
And it's stuff we're still dealing with, sadly to say. I mean,
Oh,
that's
well, yes.
yeah, I mean
Mhm.
that's a whole other topic. But just I rewatched this film a couple of years ago, and I mean, they always say, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes, and it was a wider eyed experience, shall we say?
I'm sure. I It's almost as if we had shared lists ahead of time because Carmelita, what you said at the end of your summation is the dovetail into my number 4 pick. The
Mm,
idea of like, what if they need to be questioned and there needs to be a group of people that are going to do it and push those boundaries? And that's one of the many themes of the 1999 film Arlington Road. Is that on either of your lists?
No,
mm-mm.
Okay. Have either of you seen it before?
I have seen it.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So it's Tim Robbins and Jeff Bridges,
Yeah.
Joan Cusack, and Hope Davis. The entire premise is this: a widowed George Washington University professor starts to suspect his new neighbors are involved in domestic terrorism.
Oh, yeah. I saw this one. Yeah. Ages
And
ago, but
and the wild part is for 3/4 of the movie, you think this man is unhinged, and only Jeff Bridges can play unhinged with his sweaty, beautiful hair, flowing in the wind, until you learn that he's fucking right. And then you get to hear why they do it and why it goes down. And then you get the ultimate twist, which I won't spoil now, because knowing that Tim Robbins is a terrorist is not the twist of the movie. Okay. Like it's kind of, you know, that going in. It's how it works itself out is amazing. It was written by Aaron Kruger, who people know now as like the guy that writes the Transformers movies and wrote Scream 3 and a lot of other stuff like that. He won an award for this script. It's what got him in Hollywood and got him a job as a script doctor. And Mark Pellington, the director, grabbed this and directed the hell out of it. And what really sank the movie from its time was it was supposed to come out early on in the spring, and the Columbine massacre happened.
mm,
Mm.
And so they pulled it, and then they dumped it in July, and everybody just forgot it. You know, and it made a little bit of money, but it made its time beyond time. And I didn't see it until it was out of theaters. And a friend recommended it to me, and I'll never forget this premise. He said, "Jay, you got to like the opening scene's kind of wild." He said, "But then you need to give this movie about 25 minutes." He said, and you'll be like going, what is this even about? Is it a Boy Scout troop? Is it a professor and his girlfriend? What is this? To give it those 25 minutes and then you'll be hooked. And I sat down to watch it and I'm having that exact experience. And I'm going, I mean, if there were texting at the time, I'd have been texting going, Matt, this is boring. You know, and then it hits when the second act really kicks in and you're like, oh. And then you get deep into the web of all the things. And um the political thriller part of it is what if there were, you know, there are groups of people out there and they still exist in our country today that think, you know what, we can't trust this government, we've got to rise up against them and we need to make a statement every now and then, and it's going to be a tough one, but you know that's just the medicine you get, you know. And I'll never forget the one of the coldest lines in the movie. Joan Cusack, who never plays these characters, which is why she did the movie, she said, was she said, you know, we moved here because we thought this place was safe. And when you realize, like, you're the reason it's fucking not, you know, but the way she says it is like, oh, your version of safe, it's not my version of safe. And whoa, I think like suburbia often gets played off in the horror genre as, you know, like Michael Myers completely works Phil because he could just be the guy down the street that grew up and then he comes back and, you know, the slaughter ensues, right? You know, it's the terrors at home. Well, we think about terrorism, and particularly pre 9/11, we did not think about terrorism as something that happened on our soil. It just didn't.
Right.
So I think it's fun to go back and revisit movies that were made before that was a cultural touch point for everyone and a major milestone in everyone's life. of just wow. And this wasn't something that Aaron Kruger dreamed up. He did a lot of study on it. He took classes on it, and there's a lot of things in there. There's like veiled references to Ruby Ridge and lots of other things, that we all know a lot about now. And there's tons of documentaries on and stuff. But it's just it's like I call a good page turner. It's just one of those. Once you get into it, man, it just sucks you in, and you can really, really have a great time watching it. So Arlington Road is my number 4.
Nice. Well, you touched on something that I think is another aspect of the political thriller, especially something like Arlington Road. Ideology, right?
Mm.
There's a reason why people used to say, don't talk about politics or religion.
Yeah, or her.
Because, because behind politics is there's ideology. And what is that? A lot of times it comes down to belief.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? What do you believe is the correct form of governance? What do you believe the government is supposed to do? What do you believe you're supposed to do in relation to your government, your community, and your society? So, and that people can, and I mean, we know that now, maybe it's more crystallized now than ever because of internet discourse. Everybody has a platform to talk about what they believe is the right system of government, what the government should be doing, how the government impacts your life, what you should do about that if it's not working for you. Is that, people can take one event, and if they're coming at it from different ideological standpoints, have a completely different read. And if people are really, really, really strong in their belief of a certain ideology, even if they don't recognize it in themselves as ideology, then, you can get this impasse where you can just keep talking and talking. It's like you're talking to a brick wall, right? Because people are just they're just seeing everything through that lens.
I mean, you can justify any point of view the more you do, and that's what's the fun part is when Tim Robbins and Jeff Bridges finally know the truth about each other, and you hear Tim Robbins' actual story. Like, you hear it from his point of view, so obviously you're hearing that slanted character, but the way he lays it out, you're like, no, I kind of get it. Like, wait a minute, I don't want to agree with you, but I kind of do, because you hear like what happened to him and his family that drove him to be what he is. It's wild to think about,
It's the scary nature of the truth being subjective. And
Yes.
we always like to think of it as there is one truth. It's objective. It covers everybody. And this film pokes holes at that. And it's sort of that, point of, certain point of view, if you will. And that's, I mean, it's obviously compelling, but it's damn frightening because, then it's like, well, if the truth is sort of depending on how you see it, then I mean we're sort of going down a rabbit hole of madness.
Exactly. So I recommend it to folks if you haven't watched it before, if you haven't seen it in a long time. It's definitely worth a revisit because it's a look into America before 9/11, which was a different place and a different world. We all remember it, and maybe some of our younger listeners don't, but it was a different time, and I think it gives you some insight into a lot of why the things went the way they did. So
yeah, the film was definitely ahead of its time.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, Carmelita, we're up to your number 3.
So this is a film that I was aware of, I mean, years and years and years, but had never seen until just this last week. And it made my list. Failsafe, 1964.
Ooh, strong.
Good pick. Good pick.
On my honorable mentions list.
Nice. You, Phil?
It's not on my list, but a solid pick.
Go for it, Carmelita.
So Failsafe, 1964, directed by Sidney Lumet, screenplay by Walter Bernstein and the uncredited Peter George, based on the book Failsafe by Eugene Burdick and Harvey Wheeler, starring Henry Fonda Dan O'Hellery, Walter Matthau, one of Matthau's most chilling performances.
Yeah, not what you think of when you think of Walter Matthau, people.
Frank Overton, Fitz Weaver, Edward Binns, and a very young baby-faced Larry Hagman.
Super young Larry Hagman. Oh, JR when he was but a lad.
Yes. So I loved this. I fell madly in love with this. And I kind of already knew I would, which is why I insisted on watching it ahead of this. Because I was like, I think just knowing what I know about the film and knowing Sidney Lumet and his other work, I had a feeling I needed to watch this because I had a feeling it would make my list. And it did. So the premise for anyone who hasn't seen Failsafe is that this is the height of the Cold War, detente, mutually assured destruction, all the game theory, all of those very like Cold War superpowers that have nuclear capabilities and all that it entails to just not blow us all up and end human civilization. But in this particular story, a weapons system detects an incursion, a threat, that sets off a chain of defensive maneuvers that cannot be recalled once you get past a certain point. And there's all these technical issues. And then it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? How do we prevent World War III? And so we get like the war situation room with military officials. We get political officials. Henry Fonda plays the president, and Larry Hagman plays his poor, naive, young, inexperienced in political matters, but an experienced translator who's going to help translate what the Russian officials are saying. What I loved about this was the role of technology and how this addresses that people make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And when people make mistakes, it takes, you have a little time to like reason. There's the potential for reasoning with someone, talking it out, negotiating. And the thing that's really cool about this is that there's a lot of talk about how the technology failed. But because the technology moves so quickly and so complex, and this is in 64, folks. So, I mean, just
I feel
imagine
like you're talking
today.
about like today. I feel like you're talking about ChatGPT right now.
It's moving so quickly, they can't keep up. They can't negotiate fast enough. And because of what the Cold War was, and you had all of these, the fear of the infiltration of the communists, the spying that they, there's one part where they're talking about that not even a direct order from the president will recall these bombers because his voice could be duplicated. It could be mimicked.
Wow.
And they could fool you. How do you know it's really the president? You don't know. They could mimic his voice. It's so cool how relevant it still is. And I mean, it's definitely a Cold War era film. But I mean, a lot of that Cold War rhetoric is making a comeback, folks.
The themes
Yes.
of it are what plays, and not even just the war themes. Like I feel like if we were all on Schlock and Awe right now with our friend Lindsay, you could pair this with 12 Angry Men, and they're kind of in the same corner of the lot. I mean, this is the Cold War 12 Angry Men. And if you wanted to make a triple out of it and have some real fun, you could throw the Kubrick Doctor Strangelove in there just for the heck of it.
Because they all on War Games.
Yeah, well, that would be the 80s version, but yeah. So, but yeah, no, I mean, really, like, Failsafe. I remember when I saw Failsafe, oh gosh, I think I was just out of college, and a friend of mine and I were having conversations about, these kind of movies or something. He said, "Have you seen Failsafe?" And I said, "No." And we went to the local video store and rented it because, of course, they had everything. And I just remember sitting there just being mesmerized by it. And like, holy smokes. And then I talked to my dad about it because he was in the Navy when this came out. And so I was like,
Mm.
okay, so did you see this? He said, yeah. He said, believe me, it was not the kind of thing we should have seen, considering, my job was he was on a destroyer that used to hunt nuclear submarines. That was his job. And he said, so it was the kind of thing we talked about a lot. And he said, but that's about how it would go down, because at some point, who do you trust? What do you know anymore? And you just got to hope that the level head is in the room somewhere. So it's such an incredible, great addition to the list here, Carmelita.
These movies always leave me with just such a foreboding sense of dread, and
Yeah.
just you've brought back all those feelings I have every time I watch one of these types of films, where it's just, again, where you can't trust your own eyes, or you can't believe
Hmm.
what you're hearing. That is the most unsettling fear of all, in a lot of ways, because then shit just spirals out of control.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
One of my
it's the fear of all those Twilight Zone
Yeah,
stories
Oh
and
that's
yeah.
right.
of stuff.
Yeah.
Is the like, what do you believe? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I think another aspect that I really loved about this was it comes to a point in the story where the president of the United States is speaking to the Soviet premier, and they both agree, yeah, it was an accident. There was
mhm.
a technical glitch, but neither of us can back down. And we can try to negotiate through this. And if there's some way, you could bring down the fighters, or we could do this, or we could do that. But there's also um, this recognition of we're reasonable men, but this is not a reasonable situation. And the conflict between our two countries necessitates maintaining that facade of power,
Mhm.
not appearing weak, either domestically or internationally. And so, even if someone in the back room is saying, like, no, you're making a great point, I get what you're saying, but we're still going to do this crazy thing anyway, because we have to maintain this this way of presenting in the world
Mhm.
stage.
Well, and it's I don't want to spoil it, but you don't see the end of this coming. As much as that we've
No,
laid it out for you here, you don't,
no.
and then you're gonna have lots of Phil's thoughts when you
Believe me,
watch it.
it's
Um,
all just coming back.
yeah, no, it is, but it's
Yeah.
one of those that it leaves an impression with you, and I think some of the, and I think it's so great that Sidney Lumet is the one directing this. I mean, he does New York dramas, but who else better to do this kind of thing? You don't need an action director necessarily. You need someone that can pinpoint in the drama of it. That's what makes it such a classic and timeless film. They tried to remake it several years ago, but I didn't really go for that version of it. I don't know if you bothered with that, but
I
No,
haven't seen it. No.
yeah,
no,
it's I
no.
would not recommend it. It was more like it was like a televised like live. It was one of when we were doing that on TV, like we're going to do a live thing where it's all in
Oh,
one set where George Clooney's involved and
Hmm.
like Richard Dreyfuss. I mean, they do a good job with it. It's just not the same. So it's just there's something about the way this film was done. So
Lumet always brings an edge,
He does.
yeah,
He does.
right?
it's that theater background, man. I mean,
Hmm.
all that. You even look at stuff like Serpico and some of those other films. There's just some real like raw truthfulness to all of that.
Yes.
So,
His movies always have teeth, you know?
yes, very much so. Well, Phil, I give you the unenviable task of following that.
No,
So,
I mean, this one will just, it'll suffer in comparison, truly. But we'll try. Number three for me is The Ides of March. Does anyone have this one on their list?
don't, but I have seen it.
Okay. So this was a movie. It's directed by George Clooney. He also is a co-star in it, but
Mhm.
Ryan Gosling is the headliner. And when I saw the trailer for this film, I figured, oh, it's just going to be kind of probably a cheesy attempt at a political thriller. George Clooney plays a presidential candidate on the cusp of winning his party's nomination, And the trailer does, I have to say, a very smart job at hiding what is the twist of this film. And I won't spoil it because it is kind of a great unveiling, if you will. But Ryan Gosling plays his sort of a chief of staff or chief campaign advisor, and there's a lot of backroom machinations to try and get Clooney's character to secure enough delegates to win the nomination because he's in a neck and neck fight with this other. I think he's a governor from Ohio, and he's running against I think like a senator or a congressman. And of course, a scandal develops or unfolds, so to speak, and it puts Ryan Gosling's character in the middle of it. And it's a question of loyalties, it's a question of truth, it's a question of the abuse of power. You've also got two outstanding supporting performances in this film by Paul Giamatti and the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman. And Hoffman is, I think, almost the campaign manager in the film, and he's sort of he's sort of the seedy, always on a pack of cigarettes, what we would associate for as a campaign advisor manager type. But he really becomes the film's conscience in a way. And while he's not necessarily involved or at least led to believe he's not involved or aware of the developing scandal, he sort of acts as the conscience, if you will, for Ryan Gosling's character as he's trying to sort of reconcile with his loyalties to both the campaign, but then also his desire to figure out, okay, what should I do here? And then he's also at the same time getting offerings by the rival campaign led by Paul Giamatti. So there's sort of this blurring loyalties, and then of course the scandal just sort of erupts, and it kind of puts Ryan Gosling in the metaphorical crosshairs to decide, okay, do I just sink or swim with this guy, or do I try to find a greener pasture, so to speak? And it was surprisingly effective because it's sort of ripped from the pages of the headlines. I mean, you can kind of see uh, similarities to the John Edwards scandal that was definitely topical at the time of this film. To say nothing of other political scandals in American history, Bill Clinton's, sexual peccadillos
Right.
to name a
Mm-hmm.
few. But what I liked about this film is it's not necessarily an in your face, this is what happened. There's a lot of hidden meaning, there's a lot of implication, and Clooney's character is very much in the gray area. We never quite know. I mean, he's certainly involved in a scandal, but we never quite know to what extent, particularly when there's more nefarious implications of just how clean his hands are. And again, I like that it ends on an ambiguous note where we really aren't sure what Gosling decides. We think we know what's happening, but at the same time, there's almost a little bit of covert blackmail going on between the two of them, which again just sort of adds to the palace intrigue, if you will. I mean, this is very much if you're a sucker for American politics and campaign minutia. This is one of the best ones to do it in recent memory because you're sort of right there in the nitty gritty, but it's stylized in a way where it doesn't bog you down in the weeds. It's very much a tight thriller. And again, I have to give this one to Clooney. He was very masterful at taking. I believe this was actually based on a. I think it was a play
Yeah, with the play. Yeah.
yeah, and so he's I've only read it. I never have seen it done live, but he really sort of took the essence of it and made it what this film ended up being, and I found it to be to be quite a gripping expose, if you will, because even though the characters are fictional, the situations here are definitely ones that we have seen played out in the headlines for decades in American politics.
Yeah, I would say if anyone was a fan, particularly of the first season of the American version of House of Cards, then this is a movie you should see because it's a
Bingo. Perfect.
precursor to a lot
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
Perfect comparison.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, this is a good one
Oh,
then. Yeah. You'll
Another
have
one
to,
to add to the list.
have to add that to your list, then, Carmelita. So I think you've summed it up beautifully. It's if anything else, it's just incredibly well acted.
That's
And
the thing. There's so many
yeah,
great performances in it.
yeah, everybody's really good in it, and even Jeffrey Wright and Marissa
Oh
Tomei, who
yeah,
are just
that's
kind of
right.
small roles,
Mm.
but are so good in it. I mean, they're good in anything they do, but they're really good in these things. I remember seeing this once upon a time. Jay thought he wanted to work in politics until he worked on a
Oh,
campaign.
I'm sorry.
It was just a local one, but that cured that right there. But I've always been intrigued by these kind of movies when they come out. So I think I rented this when it came out and was just like, oh yeah, I can buy it, you know. And so it's good.
I I
It's a good
can
one.
I can tell you, Jake, because I was in a previous life very much politically
Mhm.
active, so I mean I have the scars and what to prove it, and I can tell you, yeah, this is sadly more so more so truth than it is fiction.
Yeah, it's there are a lot of compromises we make because
Yeah,
we work with flawed people. That's all I
yeah,
can
that's
say.
that's
So,
right. That's right.
well, I don't have my next one is going to seem like I don't know. We're going into popcorn land, but I felt like somebody needed to. So my third one, and I just need to know real quick if it's on either of your list, is The Hunt for Red October.
Oh,
It's
good one.
not.
No.
Okay, so this I cannot remember a time in my life when this story wasn't a part of my brain because my older brother read the book because someone had recommended it to him, and he told my dad about it, who was a Navy guy again and was really into submarines, even though he wasn't on one. And so I grew up watching all these submarine movies with him and stuff. And so we saw the trailer coming out, and of course, I've had the discussion before. Sean Connery's like my lens for Bond because I saw Doctor No and all this stuff. And so Connery in anything, I'm in. Sure, yeah, Finding Forrester, sure, whatever. You're the man now, dog. I'm going to watch him. But when I found out he was in this, and I didn't really know who Alec Baldwin was at the time, I was like, oh, I got to do this. But I was like, I think I should read the book. So, very young Jay, check this out of the library. And if you've ever read the book, it's the story in the movie is in the book. It's buried in a lot of Tom Clancy's brain. And you got to know who Clancy was. He was an insurance adjuster. He was what we call today a data analyst. And he's a data guy. So he is the king of technobabble, but it's actually like matters, but you can get lost in the weeds of it to the point that he just did enough public records research and put stuff together like twos and twos that the FBI wanted to know who he was talking to because he got a lot of stuff right. He wasn't supposed to get right. It's really more about the people have tried to make these claims about which submarine this was about or whatever. It's really about a jet, and the guy landed it in Alaska, and we ended up having to deport him. But anyway, long story short, this kind of thing happened a lot during the Cold War. But what makes this work more than anything is it's all about the fact that whether it's based on something real or not, it's the fact that John McTiernan directs this so different than the way he directs something like Die Hard and Predator. There's
Mm.
action in this, but this is all around the people. This is him directing the people. And I'll never forget listening to the commentary of him talk about if you meet submarine captains, they're like university professors or university presidents. He said they're really kind of running all these departments and stuff. And so when he got Scott Glenn to play that one, that's how he played it because the guy he modeled, that's how he acted on the boat. And so they go through all that. You've got Connery again. It's just being steely cool as Marco Ramius. It's a good Alec Baldwin performance. That's almost like a dogged reporter in the way he plays Jack Ryan. It just makes all this thing flow like a smooth river. And this is one of those movies that it can just be a comfort movie. You can just let it wash over you and dream about the sheep that Sam Neill's gonna get in Montana if you want, or you can get really lost in the wait a minute, if that actually happened, there'd be a lot of other people involved. And they take the time to have all these other people weighing in on stuff and these briefings. And I mean, it's a movie in a lot of ways about a lot of meetings. And there's no great, I mean, you get one of the
Right.
premier action directors of the time to do a movie about meetings. And it's pretty wild how much action he revets out of it. So Hunt for Red October is just a one that will always live on my list. And so I've got it strong as my number 3.
Love it. Love it.
Nice. Yeah, I saw it in the movie theater.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think I revisited it a few years ago, I think. And no, there's definitely there's the layers, right? And yes,
Mm,
like there's
Hmm.
kind of that action, and of course it's like it's Connery and Baldwin and all these people that you're like, oh, you get to see them in this crazy story about this submarine, and you got all that Cold War tension,
hmm
but because of the performances, you get that human element,
mm,
Hmm.
that these are not just um military personnel stripped of all their humanity, right?
Hmm.
That these are people in this bonkers situation, and what do you do? Do you follow orders or not?
Yeah. And it's
So
not and it's not about a pending war or anything
right.
like that. It's what is this person's intentions? Where do we
Yes.
have to be? We don't know, and no one can know about this.
Right.
Because they're kind of like failsafe. It's like nobody knows except just
hmm
the people in these rooms. I mean, you got a great James Earl Jones performance in here, kind of
mm.
just sprinkled in, and I mean, I love at one point when he says, "I told you to speak your mind, but not that," so, and because he goes off on the one of the generals or senators or whatever, one of the Alec Baldwin does in one of the scenes. It's a in a lot of ways it's a like a courtroom drama too in some ways. So it's, I don't know, I find you can watch this movie from a lot of different lenses. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's one that does appeal to people on those different levels, right?
mm-hmm.
So, not unlike V for Vendetta,
Mm-hmm.
you can get more people
Yeah.
Yeah.
interested, right? Because it has those layers. And it's, it's a movie that people can get, they can pop their popcorn
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy Sean Connery playing a Russian.
Yeah. It sounds an
Which
awful
we
lot
all
like
needed. We all needed that in our lives.
yeah. Well, it sounds an awful lot like Sean Connery playing a Spanish Highlander at one time or
Yes.
another too. It's the same thing, but yeah, it's a great one. All right, Carmelita, we're up to your spot for number two.
Okay. I mean, this is one I've loved. Oh, I've loved it for so long. The Manchurian Candidate from 1962.
On my almost honorable mentions list. So,
Nice.
Same.
mhm,
I love this movie. I,
mhm.
I fucking love The Manchurian Candidate so much. So, directed by John Frankenheimer, screenplay by George Axelrod, based on the book The Manchurian Candidate from 1959 by Richard Condon. Stars Frank Sinatra, Lawrence Harvey, Janet Leigh, Angela Lansbury, Henry Silva, James Gregory. I I'll never forget watching this, and it's that first time. And I think what I love about this is that you've got these very real world fears, right? What if someone could be turned? This
hmm
was, I mean,
This was the figure. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, variations of this premise.
Hmm.
A lot of films, a lot of stories did variations on this. The Manchurian Candidate, really, when you look at it, it's like, that's crazy. The way in which they turn um, this soldier against his country and to become this agent of the communists, this sleeper agent. It's it's a wild premise. The brainwashing that happens here and the triggers that are used, and but I think even though on paper that's crazy, it taps into, as we talked about, that realism, that very real fear.
hmm
What if the person next to me, and you touched on this with Arlington Road, what if the
Hmm.
person next to me is working against us?
hmm
And I think, as if you look at this
Oh.
kind of as an allegory, I mean, today, where a lot of folks get their news and their op-eds on the internet, and and people get bought into ideas. And I mean, I've known people who were kind of blissfully going along with their life, and then they come across a podcast or a YouTube channel or a certain news source. And because of the clicking, it
Mm-hmm.
reinforces, the algorithm reinforces, and suddenly you you talk to this person again, and now they've got all these political ideas, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know you felt that way. And so I think it plays on those fears of the person who can be turned.
It's not only that it plays on the idea of what if there's a sleeper agent? What if it was one of our heroes?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right.
the real twist of this, and it's what if people only think of Frank Sinatra as the pseudo mobster, and stuff like that in the Vegas situation, like you don't
Right.
realize what a talented performer the man
Oh,
was.
yeah.
Oh, he's great in
and
this.
and you, I mean, again, the cast here is incredible. You've got Angela Lansbury and Janet Leigh doing a hell of a work. Lawrence Harvey's awesome in
I
this.
love Lawrence Harvey. He's one
Yeah,
of my favorites.
Yeah,
but
he's really good in this.
Frankenheimer's the thing that really ties it all together, though. It's like we've just got like a hit list of directors tonight, by the way, y'all. So this is,
Yeah.
but that's, I think, that's a key element. You got to have somebody that can manage all of that stuff, and he's incredible at it. So yeah, I like this. I actually don't hate the remake of it with Denzel and Meryl Streep and Liev Schreiber. I think it's okay. It's different,
It's okay.
it's okay, but it's not the same. But it's fine. It works.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. Yeah, I think it's the tension in this.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
even having seen it many times, I always feel that tension every time that I revisit it, even though I know the plot, I know what's going to happen, I've seen it. The way that this film is executed visually and the performances, just the whole package gets me feeling tense again,
Mm-hmm.
anxious again, not unlike the very first time I saw it. So,
No, I remember the first time I watched this film, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, which is a rare feat. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a rare feat with particularly a lot of films. We're going back, this was, early 1960s. The way this film is crafted, there's almost I would almost say it's almost like a modern sort of a through line to it where it holds up remarkably well, putting aside the thematics and the storytelling, but just the way that the film is shot, the way it is constructed, it's really one of those films you would say is timeless.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
No, I agree. I can't add any more to it than that. It's just it's one of those two that once the clock starts ticking on it, you don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that's what makes a great thriller just in general. If you're not sure how this is going to end,
Mm.
then where do you go? What do you do next? So
Perfect choice.
yeah,
Perfect choice.
yeah, excellent, excellent as always. All right, Phil, we're up to your number two.
So on that idea of not knowing where it was going to go, this film we certainly did know where things were going to go because it was part of the historical record. But as far as a film that takes a real life event but manages to make it a on the edge of your seat thriller, I can think of no better film than 13 Days. I
Mm.
I adore this film. And yes, some Kennedy historians will quibble with um Kevin Costner's role in the film as O'Donnell and just how
Mm-hmm.
much sway and impact he had on the Kennedy brothers in that 13-day period. But putting sort of those nitpicks aside, for a film that is about an event that people were practically aware of in real time, and of course in the subsequent years have known the intricate history of just how close we came to a nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia. The tension is unbelievable in this film. I had to watch this years ago for a history assignment, and of course, we were covering the Kennedy era and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and so all of this was fresh in your mind. But you know what happens. I mean, we're all still here, so spoiler alert,
Right.
everybody. But the way this film unfolds, it's like any good thriller. You're sort of like, oh my God, like, are we going to go to blows here? I mean, there's that scene where the ships keep coming and keep coming, and then Kennedy, played brilliantly by Bruce Greenwald in the film. He's on the phone, belay that order, belay that order. It's just, I mean, you were like, oh my God, like we're this close to midnight, and of course,
Mhm.
we know of what happens, but you just get so lost in the tension and the drama, and then of course what was going on behind the scenes. You've got Kennedy and his communications, you've got Bobby's role in the entire affair. I just it's a masterclass in suspense and tension that, again, even though we know what happened, just the way it is presented, it's like as if you're watching it unfold for the first time and you're not sure, oh God, is the button going to get pressed?
Well, and to that point, like things like this and Apollo 13 were like, I know how it ends,
Yeah.
but that's not the point. The point is the how did we get there? The why did we get
Bingo.
there? What did we learn? And I've got it. I'm glad you called him out because I was going to say Bruce Greenwood gives the best cinematic performance as John F. Kennedy
Thank you.
of
Yes.
anyone. He had him down. Not only the mannerisms and the accent and all the stuff, but just the
It was the embodiment of Kennedy.
yeah, he was everything that we know about Kennedy and the way he operated as a president. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about as a person, but as a president in that office, Greenwood had him cold, and he really did. And it's a great Costner performance too.
Oh yeah, no, he's phenomenal.
Whether that guy was really that involved or
Yeah.
not, who cares? It's a good tale, and it's a good avatar to tell that through because
Well, that's
me and you and Carmelita, we're not ever going to be in the White House Situation Room to know. And what version of it they tell us about is not going to be what really, how it all went
Right.
through. But the
Right.
people that were there wrote the book on it.
Bingo.
And after years, they're like, okay, yeah, we can tell that now. Like we
Yeah.
can let that get out because we were on the brink of nuclear destruction. I mean, like I mean, like my parents and my dad in particular still remembers what that was like. This is before he was in the Navy, but he was in a farming community in North Alabama, and they were doing nuclear drills because we didn't know. You never knew how close it was going to be, and where we grew up wasn't that far from Florida and Atlanta and these spots. We were going to get it, So it's oh God, well that's a great one. I'm glad you pulled that one out. I saw that in theaters and love this movie, and it's one of my brother's favorite movies too. He talks about it all the time. So
yeah, you can
Nice.
easily rewatch it. That's the thing.
yeah.
I think I first saw it. I think maybe we rented it. Yeah, I remember watching it with my dad.
Definitely a dad core movie.
Oh,
Like,
it's totally a dad
doubt.
movie.
Yeah.
And so it's been a long time, but the one thing that really does stand out to me was that, yes, I already knew about the historical events
Right.
that it's exploring, but you do get that tension, even though you know ultimately how the situation resolves.
Yeah.
They do manage to capture the anxiety and that being on the brink, right?
Yeah.
The feeling of being right on the edge.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stick with the Kevin Costner thing for my next one, but it may not be the one that you think. I'm going to take you back to 1987 to a steamy, bleak, seriously horny Cold War noir film called No Way Out. Is it on either of your lists?
No.
Okay. Have you both seen it?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oh, Carmelita, this is your bag. I promise you. It's about Cold War paranoia still in full force. Roger Donaldson directs this, and it's Costner's. It's one of his best performances. It's top 3 for sure, and he's rather young in it. Flanked by an unreal cast. You got George Sunda, Will Patton, a very young Will Patton, and Gene Hackman giving a performance people have forgotten he was in, and the unforgettable Sean Young. Probably her best thing outside of playing an android in her life. Or maybe the helicopter pilot, in Firebirds. Just go ask our friend Mike from Action for Everyone. But either way, it's an incredible cast, but it's all about this idea of a sleeper agent, but not so that they can commit an assassination or whatever, but that they're a spy, and who is this spy that is framing this senator with this torrid affair and all these different machinations. And you also get to see like very, very early rudimentary computer aided technology of like, can we take a photo and clean it up in a computer to figure out who this is, in this broken negative of this camera. And the way it works out, I won't spoil the wild twist that maybe you see coming, maybe you don't, but it doesn't matter. The ride is completely worth it because Costner takes you on that whole journey. And again, it's a movie too that one of its best qualities is how fleet it is. Like this, it gets in and out without wasting a lot of time. It's under 2 hours, but honestly, a lot of it is opening and closing credits of sweeping shots of the DC area. So it's about 100 minutes long, and it flies. It really does. It's based on a book called The Big Clock that was written in the 40s, and they updated it a little bit to get it to the 80s. But just an incredible watch and an incredible film. So if you haven't seen it, definitely recommend it because you'll be asking yourself, who is Yuri at the end of this? And that's what I'll leave you with on that one. So No Way Out is number 2.
I pulled it up, and I think maybe I did see this like when it came out.
Okay.
But at this point, it would be like a first time watch because it's been so long.
Definitely, like this lives in political thriller land, but it also lives in one of my other favorite 80s and 90s things, which is like the erotic thriller land, because those cross over a lot.
You and I share this love of the erotic thriller.
Yes, we share these things, and because you can tell really interesting stories in those contexts, and so the fact that they choose to do that and tell the political thriller is it's a no small feat.
Yeah. Well, and these are power dynamics again, right?
Exactly.
Perfect choice. Absolutely perfect choice.
All right, Carmelita, we're up to your number 1 political thriller.
Have you got Z from 1969 on your list?
I do not, but a great choice.
Wonderful choice.
Oh my God, I love this movie so much. So Z, directed by Costa Gavras. And I actually, at one point, I was trying to justify to myself putting 2 Costa Gavras movies on my list, and that just seemed a little excessive. So he's got another one in my honorable mentions. Screenplay by George Semprún and Costa Gavras, based on the novel Z. By Vasilis Vasilikos. I'm not good with Greek names. Apologies.
You say this is all very Greek.
Yes, it's all very Greek. But it is a French and Algerian production because this could not be made in Greece.
No.
Because the events of Z draw from a very real assassination of a Greek politician that had occurred earlier in the 60s, and the disappearance of another figure in Greek politics. So, yeah, this was not going to get made in Greece. It stars Yves Montand, Irene Papas, and Jean-Louis Trintignant. I think this movie is so amazing. I think the thing about Z, it captures that on-the-ground feeling of, let's say you're at a political rally or a lecture, which happens in this film. And then suddenly there's a counter protest and, oh my God, it's getting violent. And now what? And who's doing what? And where are the police to stop this violence? Oh, well, maybe maybe they're behind it. And so there's a very public murder of a prominent politician at this kind of political talk that ends up turning into a violent protest. And one lone magistrate, he's the brave, just man who is going to go up against this corrupt government. He is going to get to the bottom of who is behind the murder of this politician. And everybody else in the government and the military is doing everything they possibly can to cover it up. And so, and I think what this film captures is how daunting a task that is, to have to try and get the evidence, to try and get witnesses together, and at every step be thwarted, and to know that, like, what can you do if the powers that be are going to throw everything they have at making something disappear. I think it also captures something that, this taking place in the 60s in Greece. But we had a version here in the United States with kind of counterculture and protests against the Vietnam War and other policies in the United States. And countries around the world have had these moments where there is a movement of people who don't agree with something that the government is doing and seek out different ways of voicing that, holding rallies, having sit-ins, whatever the means is. And then to have that be violently suppressed. And so it captures that, how crushing that is to have your voice silenced, and if you have enough conviction, what it means to continue to step forward and not be silenced, even though it probably means you're going to be killed, or imprisoned, or what have you. And so I think there's a real, like, raw, frenetic energy to Z that makes you feel like you're right there in the middle of it with these people. And the procedural aspects of it are interesting. And I mean, there's tons of procedurals, but there's something about this one that I like the feel of going along on this investigation. And just knowing that, like, everything that this poor magistrate is doing is going to be, it's moves and counter moves.
Yeah, the thing that I loved about it when I saw it, Carmelita, was it's similar to what I loved about Paths of Glory. Was I can relate to it, but it's happening in a place I don't live in. But there's something comforting to know that it's just as fucked up over there as it is here. like that they have the, because it's a true statement. Folks are folks, and people are just people, and the same kind of corruption we could see happening here in America happens everywhere. And the same kind of people who fight against it are in that same running a marathon straight uphill to try to make a difference about it. But there's a balance in it, though, and that's one thing that this movie does a good job of, and Paths of Glory does as well, for as dark as they are and stuff. There's no reason by the end of it to lose hope. It's like the fight is still the good fight.
It's worth fighting.
Right. Yeah, that's that's like that great line at the end of Seven, where he did Morgan Freeman's talking about, like, it's a good world and it's worth fighting for, and I believe part of that statement.
Yeah.
And you're like, which part? Well, obviously probably the part worth fighting for, because it's not, this has not been David Fincher does not show you the sunshine and rainbows of the world, but for the same reasons, though, here, and I've seen Z. This was one of those that I just came across probably when I worked at the library when I was in college, and just pulling things off the shelves. And I had a book once upon a time of, like, Roger Ebert's like 3 paragraph movie reviews from like 1930 to 1987 or something. And this was one of the last entries. And I read that thing cover to cover. And I always thought, like, oh, I just want to know what that's all about. And it took me years later to know that the Z is he lives, it's Greek. But watching that, I remember watching it and going, like, oh, this is very much like the counterculture protests. And if I could see this, like this, it's been a long time though since I've watched it. I need to go back and revisit this now.
That's a great one. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Very strong. All right, Phil, you're up to your top spot.
So I want to preface because this has been on my number one list since you first announced this um, uh, discussion a couple months ago. So I have been holding this one in the store tank for a while, and this is not a conventional political thriller, and I'm sure a lot of people would push back, and I would welcome that. But I look at this film through many different layers, but the one that keeps coming back, and it was just made clear to me a week or so ago, that this is a political thriller, not in the conventional sense, but in the sort of the subtext, if you will. And it is a surprising choice. I know none of you, I know you guys do not have this one on your list, but for me, it is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And
Ooh, all right.
and
I
again,
love
That
it.
works. It works.
well, no, and again, I will explain my reasons. Of course, this is the third and final installment of the prequel trilogy. This was the final Star Wars film directed by George Lucas. This, of course, is the one where Anakin Skywalker famously goes to the dark side, becomes Darth Vader. We know that. What I find more compelling about this film, putting aside sort of the theatrics of Star Wars, because Star Wars is a political beast. I think anyone that
Mhm.
says otherwise is not paying attention. But what I find most compelling about this film is this is George Lucas knowing his history.
Mhm.
This is a treatise on how democracy dies. Democracy, Republican form of governments, small r Republican form of governments, are never taken over by a great force. They are always corrupted and destroyed from within. And we are seeing this right here in this film play out. Of course, it's established in the previous two films, but it all comes to a head right here with the machinations of a masterful, manipulative politician who plays on the workings of the system, uses it to his full advantage, and then once there is a crisis, once they are in the fog of war, he escalates his plans and, of course, uses any said crisis to amass more and more power. And the people stand there cheering it on as they are basically being sentenced to their tyrannical fates. And I love, if you look at it through the view of Anakin Skywalker, he is a pawn in this. He is a victim of propaganda. And again, we know the story, but if you were just to look at it from that lens, you can see how someone gets corrupted by the charismatic appeals, whims of a strong man, a leader who promises everything under the sun. And then once your worldview is conflicted, everything you may have known is right then becomes wrong. And then you realize, oh my God, I've been put on the wrong side. And so it's really an allegory for how people are easily led astray by the charm or sophistication of a masterful manipulative politician, but it's also how there is a willingness of the people, if you will, to go along with it.
Mhm.
Palpatine in the movie is amassing more and more power. He's taking control of the army. He's taking control of the Jedi, and nobody questions it. It's all in the name of winning the war. It's all in the name of saving democracy. But yet, of course, once there was a crisis, well, oh my God, we must give this man more power. And again, there's that famous line. It's been memed to death at this point, but it's so apt, where Natalie Portman's character, Padme, says, this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. And this, of course, after Palpatine has declared himself emperor. And for all of the the knocks on George Lucas and the prequel films, this is such an apt movie because it's so aware of its history. Again, whether we're talking about Caesar, whether we're talking about Hitler, whether we're talking about contemporary uh, examples. I mean, this is a story that is so seeped in history and world events, even though it's set in a galaxy far, far away,
Mm-hmm.
we can understand and relate to it because we've either read about it or we've experienced it firsthand. And so again, this was on my list from the beginning, but seeing the film again a week or so ago just sort of reinforced that. I mean, it's a great, entertaining popcorn film. Again, it's a Star Wars movie, but it's so much deeper and richer than just another, all right, here's space wizards fighting,
Mm-hmm.
aboard a Death Star. Like, there's a lot more thematic resonance and subtext that's there, and I think now more people are tuning into that fact. But for those of us who have been
Mm-hmm.
there for the beginning, it's kind of nice to be validated.
Phil, I love that you picked this. I really do because you've opened this up, and I think for people to look at Star Wars movies the way that they can be looked at in so many different ways. And I'll
Right.
give you something that I've always read as part of this is that and I love that you called Anakin the pawn. He's the pawn of the government.
Yeah.
He's also the pawn of the religion.
Right.
And there's a line that kind of gets missed that people make fun of now or whatever that Yoda says, like, could have been a prophecy misread too. And
Mm,
that's supposed to be like the Pope or one of the cardinals going, I don't know, maybe we're not right. I don't,
right.
maybe we missed something in the translation. But that's the war going on here is
Yeah.
the chief religion
Yep.
versus the chief powermonger.
Yep.
And in the middle, and the reason people are thunderously applauding and what you learn, it's probably the only thing the Disney sequels maybe gave us was that everybody got rich off of it.
Yeah.
And that's how you
Yeah.
seduce people is you make them comfortable.
Bingo.
Yeah, and on either side. And
Nobody wants to lose their station.
no, and that's the thing is, and it's what you see in the way that Palpatine plays Anakin is he offers him every temptation in the world, and none of it works until he realizes that the one thing that matters to him is that girl dying.
And
And
yeah,
that's when he
bingo.
does like, oh, I can play on that. I know how to work that angle.
And
And
that's the thing. Like, that is a relatable human emotion. Again,
yeah,
put aside the theatrics. Like, imagine being in that place. Oh my God, I'm going to lose the person that I love most. I mean, how far would you go? I mean, again, we all
right,
think we have morals and lines we won't cross, but again, until
right,
you're put in that position, I mean, it's
yeah.
it's a it's a real devil's choice.
No, it fits. It fits.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not a fan of
Oh no, I hear you. I hear you. It's not everybody's cup of tea.
no, not at all. And I sat in the line for the midnight showing in the drizzling rain.
Oh,
Uh, so yes, I walked away a
mm-hmm.
little brokenhearted. But your inclusion of it on this list, I mean, yeah, it's got all those elements. It's all there. And I think one thing I will say for the prequels, and this one specifically, it brings to the forefront these themes, right? This
Right.
drawing from history. The threads are there in the original trilogy,
Yeah.
right? Anytime you put forth anyone who's like, yeah, I want to see Darth Vader do his thing, it's like, yeah, he's a fascist. I mean,
Yeah.
and they always do have the cool looking costumes, but
They,
Mhm.
that's right. No,
still
but
a
again,
fascist.
watch where you're cheering, everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean
Right.
that's my one
Yeah.
knock about the movie Rogue One, which I think is brilliant.
That
It's,
ending.
is that the ending should be Jen and
Cassian.
Andor, yeah,
Yeah.
on the beach.
Yeah.
The
Sacrificing themselves. Yeah.
the badass Darth Vader scene could have happened right before that, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
would have been cool with it. 'Cause, look, I thought it
Oh,
was
it's a
cool.
great scene,
I
but no.
popped for that too. but it
It
kind
sort
of
of
undercuts,
it undercuts the message. No, it's
the problem. It's like, well, but it's supposed this is a movie about sacrifice because none of these people live. That's the point. And that's the only thing I ding that movie for. And I don't entirely blame the filmmakers for that. I feel like the studio's the one that said, this needs to be here.
I mean, I'd bet money on it.
Yeah,
it feels like a studio.
Feels very much like a Disney decision, by the way.
We've got to have Darth Vader with a lightsaber. Yeah.
Yes, and we end with that. We got to butt right up next to that fourth one that everybody loves. Okay, cool, fine. But even beyond that, though, like now in retrospect, I think it became fashionable to make fun of the prequels because people on the internet made funny videos about it.
Yeah.
And we can all be entertained by those things, and I certainly was too, but then it just became like a sport. But now you watch them and you're like, you know what? Like, yeah, there's some problems here or whatever. But even if they're not your thing, you can watch them and go like, yeah, these movies aren't just about space wizards. They're a lot of others. It's like that's like watching Aliens and going, that's just about, rescuing a kid from a bunch of bugs. Well, yeah, but it's also about a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And James Cameron will tell you that in hours if you give it to him.
Oh, yeah.
So,
God be with you.
Yeah, no, I love that you included this because it is an out of the box way of thinking about it, but you're dead on. It's everything you want in a political thriller. And if you watch it like that, I think you can get a different. It's fun to take like franchise movies like that and watch them out of order. And it's so topical because this was on an anniversary, and I watched it recently, and I didn't watch anything else around it because I said I can just watch this. I can just jump right in, and I'm like, man, this is so good. It's so much better than people remember it, and as an allegory for things, it's so prescient to this day. So, yeah, very good. Well, I'm going to reveal something about myself that you two may not know, but longtime listeners of Film Strip will know. I'm a big fan of historical fiction. And what I mean by that are like alternate history, things like that, where we take something that really happened, but then we give it a twist, right? And we go down a road with it. And I think it has to be rooted in some bit of truth or something that happened so that we can all have a central motivating piece. But then I don't need it to be a documentary because I feel like that, or a book about the real thing and what happened. You want to go and chase a few rabbits for 3 hours and you get Kevin Costner to do it. And you said it in the 1990s. Of course, I'm talking about the seminal Oliver Stone film JFK here. I'm going to be along for the ride. Set aside what we know, don't know, may ever know, or never care to know. I'm with you, Carmelita. I don't care. He's dead. Let's move on. I mean, at this point, I don't care who did it. It doesn't matter anymore. But set all that aside. The way that Stone weaves the timelines and the narratives hooks you in for this ride. Tommy Lee Jones, Kevin Bacon, John Candy in an unforgettable scene, Gary Oldman, Joe Pesci, Laurie Metcalf from freaking Roseanne, Michael Rooker, Sissy Spacek, all there. But it's Kevin Costner's best performance, hands down, until Yellowstone maybe or something like that. He sells the narrative about this conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy and all the people involved in it. And it's another one of those things like, if you know the real Jim Garrison trials and stuff, this went nowhere. It more or less ruined him in a lot of ways. But the man believed it till the day he died. He bought it. And the way he sells the story to you makes you sit back and question, well, I know it's kind of like watching wrestling. Like, I know that's bullshit and that's bullshit, but that looked real. Or that sounded real. And it's any good bit of those people will tell you the part of the work is selling you just enough truth with the fabrications to bring you in. And the linchpin of all that is Donald Sutherland's like 7-minute scene, which he rehearsed with his wife just walking through a park. He had that monologue down and he told her, just interrupt me with random questions so I don't break character. It steals the movie halfway through it to tell you, here's what happened. And you can go look it up and stuff on YouTube, the Mr. X scene, it's called. It's just another one of those movies, again, that anytime part of it's on, I'm like, if I start watching this, I'm not going to stop. Do I have time to do this right now? And then am I prepared for the rabbit hole I'm going to go down? because I'm going to go, let me see here. Who was that person? Because I think you can get something new out of it every time. It's Stone's best film. It's the best put together film altogether. That includes some really great ones he was a part of. But to me, there was never the apex moment of all the stuff he can do is here in JFK. And I saw it in theaters. I owned the double VHS of it. I think I have it on digital now, so I did skip the disc version and things like that. But it's just one that if you ask me for a political thriller, the first thing that comes in my mind is that score and that movie, JFK.
No, I finally saw it for the first time a few years ago. It is a great film.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Oliver Stone is a tremendous writer, tremendous director, just an all around great filmmaker. And the projects that he chooses, because he has a personal stake, right? A passion for the topic.
Oh yeah.
Hence all his Vietnam films. He served in Vietnam. And I when I finally watched this, it really took me back to that time when it used to be conspiracy theories, like a person, like you really had to like hunt down information. You had to go to a library. You had to get magazines and send away for stuff. And before the internet, like to have a theory about some, clandestine thing or some hidden thing or some conspiracy, you really had to dig. And there was an intellectual exercise to these things. I mean, it's kind of the basis for like something like X-Files, right? Like that's how this stuff used to feel. Hence, you have the characters of the lone gunman. Like people would really get into this. I think nowadays true crime has some of the feeling, right? The conspiracy theory used to.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like, yeah, you can just put on a YouTube video and someone will lay out for you all of this information that they've gleaned from here and there.
Why the Muppets are the allegory for the Bolshevik Revolution.
Right. It's kind of handed to you now, but it used to be this digging, and I think that was something I really appreciated about JFK.
Yeah. Did a lot of work for that.
Was that feeling of this passion for to know the truth, to find some truth, to find more information, to get to the bottom of something. And how he weaves this story, the seeking out of all those little kernels of truth.
I would agree with you, Jay. I think it is probably his best film, just in terms of the construction of it, because he takes us on this journey. I mean, I felt like I was doing JFK conspiracy theory work. I mean, every time I've rewatched this film, and like even sometimes I'll be flipping through YouTube and like I'll just rewatch the Mr. X speech because it's just such a wonderful 7 or 8 minutes of just a brilliant actor and great filmmaking. But every time I've rewatched it, like I feel I end up going down the JFK rabbit hole, which it's like, I guess well done, Oliver. You've got me down to, go, spend 2 hours of looking at this and that. But it's such an experience. And what I love, I think, the most about this film, you were completely exhausted by the end of it. Not in like, oh my God, it is a long film, but you were worn out. You were like, dear God, like who did it? Like you're ready to scream, but also like, dear God, this is hopeless. Like we're never going to get to the bottom of it. I mean, it hits you on so many levels, but just the exhaustion, because you're feeling it with Kevin Costner by the end of it.
Completely. And I think that's what is the reward in going back to it, if you haven't in a while, even if you don't buy any of it. I don't. I'll tell you now. I just, for the record, I think a lot of people would have loved to have killed the president, but they weren't going to do it. and Lee Harvey Oswald did it because he was out of his mind and just was a zealot with nothing to lose. And they just said, yeah, we can go with that. And you know what it allowed a lot of people to do, though, is having that dust up all the time about who did what or whatever allowed a lot of people to make a lot of decisions that kept us involved in things that we were going to get out of. That is historical record. I believe that 100%. Yep. I believe more in the conspiracy of opportunism than I do in the conspiracy of assassination these days. I think people see an opportunity and then they jump on it, but they don't have the wherewithal to pull it off themselves. That's my 2 cents on the JFK assassination for anybody that cared. But as a movie, it's just infinitely watchable. Like there's just so much about it. So I could have not dreamed of when I pitched this to you two to do this. I thought, man, we're gonna have 11 of the same movies. We didn't have a single damn one in the top 5, and that speaks to the 2 things. 2, you two have incredible cinematic choices and tastes, and so that's another reason you're on the show, obviously, but also to the breadth of this genre and all the places you can pull this from. So I want to know what was on your honorable mentions list, though, real quick. Carmelita, what were your honorable mentions?
Some things I had: The Day of the Jackal, Parallax View, The Anderson Tapes, JFK was on my honorable mentions. The Conversation, Jacob's Ladder.
Ooh, that's a sneaky one.
Political elements, Jacob's Ladder.
That's a sneaky one. Yeah.
Marathon Man. The Boys from Brazil.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I love The Boys from Brazil.
Marathon Man's a good double with your Blowout, by the way. Those live in the same world. So.
And then the other Costa Gavras film that I was toying with was State of Siege from 1972.
All right.
That's a good one.
Phil, what were your honorable mentions?
So Blowout, like we mentioned, JFK, The Manchurian Candidate, and THX 1138.
Ooh,
oh yeah,
nice.
It was right on the edge with that one, but then kept it back.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I had Failsafe, as I mentioned before, but I also had All the President's Men from 1976, which Classic. You want go watch Nixon and watch that because it's a great examination of newspaper reporting, and having done it for a living, I can attest to this. It's some of the most boring stuff in the world to try to make dramatic. It's a lot of phone calls and sitting around and typing things and going, "No, that ain't right." And the way they weave the Woodward and Bernstein story, along with all the other people in that one, is great. War Games from 1983, which kind of came when we were talking about Failsafe. But yeah, I love that. That's the original techno thriller of the early 80s, and it holds up, even though Broderick sucks in it because he's a terrible actor. But it's a good movie. But it's a good movie. Yeah. And everybody else in it is great. And then I'll give you one. I mentioned before that I love these court things or whatever. My favorite John Grisham book, movie adaptation, all of it, The Pelican Brief from 1993, which is about assassinating Supreme Court justices so you can get your oil rights the way you want. That doesn't sound contemporary at all. No. But now the book, if you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. It's a good audio book. It's a good page turner. It's a great read, and it's got a little different twist to it. So there's a different relationship dynamic. The movie, though, with Denzel and Julia Roberts, and it's because Alan J. Pakula, who directed All the President's Men, directed it, and he added an element of class to that just it's another comfort movie, man. You can put that one in, and I can just I'm cuddled up on the couch on a rainy day, and me and Denzel are going to go on a ride, and it's good. It's really so those are my honorable mentions. But I wanted to give everybody the lists as it were. So Carmelita, you had Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, Blowout, Failsafe, The Manchurian Candidate, and Z. All those will be linked in the show description. Phil, you had V for Vendetta, Nixon, The Ides of March, 13 Days, and Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And I had Paths of Glory, Arlington Road, The Hunt for Red October, No Way Out, and JFK in my top 5. And so, like I say, I could not have dreamed that we would have such different top 5s. But I think there's only like 2 or 3 among all of us that one of us haven't seen, or whatever. So, which is
Something for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, there really is.
A lot of good choices here.
There are. So we recommend, like I say, I'll put the list of those on the show description. Go throw those in your Just Watch app, and you can find them. A lot of them are going to be on Prime or Tubi or something like that. But they're definitely worth seeking out. I would put a stamp on all of them for sure. Phil, Carmelita, I cannot thank you both enough for being here. This has been just a long show. I know it's been a lot, and we've put a lot to get this one together. But thank you both for being a part of this. Tell folks how they can follow you and all the great stuff you've got going on the internet. Phil, let's start with you.
Well, again, Jay, thank you for having me back. Carmelita, always great to chat movies with you as well. If you haven't had your fill of me this evening, I would certainly recommend and would love for you to give my show a follow, Phil at the Movies. New episodes each and every Friday where I say it is for the love of movies.
Carmelita?
Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure. So thank you both, Jay, for inviting us back, and Phil for joining in so we can talk movies again. So I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky and Letterboxd. Same handle for everything at Carmelita Says.
Fantastic. All that will be linked in the show description as well, folks. And of course, you can follow this show on social media and all the platforms at Film Strip Pod, and subscribe wherever you find podcasts. You'll find all of our regular review episodes as well as a few of these session shows sprinkled throughout. I do recommend that you check out Phil's show and just follow Carmelita. She's on a lot of great shows and usually doing a lot of cool stuff like this. So you'll always have a good time listening to both of them. But I appreciate you guys for joining us on this, and appreciate everyone who was listening. So until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of Film Strip Sessions.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.